Okay, so I have got Miriam here, who is the Chief Culture Officer at Yelp. Welcome to this this interesting and brightly lit pod today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's nice to be in this very tiny pod with you.
Yeah, I know. It's quite bright, but
it's very bright.
Yeah,
it's really helping my jet lag.
That's good stuff. So, are you having a good time at the event today? Because you're over from San Francisco, I think.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful day. I've been walking around, talking with some of the vendors and talking with other speakers and attendees. Really fun event.
Amazing. You got to get your speaking here, so you managed to get your piece out of the way quite early, which is great because you can now enjoy it. So I think I'm right in saying you were talking about a storytelling initiative that you've been doing at Yelp, particularly in relation to remote workers. I think, that's obviously the crux of why you were doing it. Do you want to just tell us a bit about, for the people who are listening to the podcast who obviously weren't at your talk, give us a bit of a feel for what that initiative was about and why it came about as well.
Yeah, so in 2024 we were celebrating our 20th anniversary of being a company. And so we were thinking about a lot of different initiatives. Since 2020, we've been a remote company. We've gone fully remote now. We have employees distributed all over the world. And we know that it's really hard to build connection in a remote environment. We no longer have this sort of ability to run into people in the hallways. We don't have these serendipitous interactions anymore. We're not able to read body language and social cues in the way that we were able to before. And so we thought about what it would take to create more of this connection. And my team is doing this all the time. But the 20th anniversary, along with our values, sort of came together in a confluence along with storytelling that allowed us to say, what would it look like if we invited people in our employee resource groups to tell their stories? And so that's where we really started, was we had these stories centered around our values, things like authenticity and tenacity, play well with others. And then we recruited the storytellers from we have about 21 different employee resource groups spanning many different
globally.
And spanning many different lived experiences. And so by first engaging folks from these particular groups and then having the stories kind of all thematically go along with the values, what it did was it gave us an opportunity to hear stories from people that we probably haven't heard from. These are all frontline employees. And it allowed us to have a real different type of meeting. So these are 50-minute meetings, which are a pretty common time frame for us inside the company, but they're really, really different in terms of the way we set the ground rules to make a psychologically safe space so that people can share these stories and so that other people can listen.
So who's in the meetings? Anyone in that same work group? Or
anyone in the company.
Or anyone? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so anyone in the company can attend one of these story slams. In the beginning, I think people came in a little bit skeptically. So they said, what is this story slam? It's a brand new thing. We have been working with a UK-based storytelling coach. So that person, Lalith, has been, he's a pediatrician from the National Health Service, and he was starting to tell stories inside the NHS during the pandemic, and then actually left medicine to do this work full-time.
Okay.
And so one of our employees had connected with him at a workshop around bereavement. And that's where they came up with this idea of having these story slams for our 20th anniversary. And since then, what's happened is that more and more people have heard about these story slams. So our attendance has gone up. And then as sort of things went on in the year, we thought, wow, these are working so well for frontline employees who are members of our employee resource groups, as well as just anyone who wants to attend. What if we did an executive story slam? And that's when things really changed.
I bet they were popular.
It was the most popular optional event that the company had in 2024.
Yeah, incredible. And so, I do really want to hear about the leadership version of it. But just go back to the beginning of how did you get people to come forward to do the storytelling, and also how did you? I'm interested in because that could go. Everyone's different, right? Everyone's got different stories, but everyone's got different styles and different, I guess, sort of things that they would be nervous about or concerned about as well. How did you kind of set the ground rules and make that a safe, as you said, a safe space for them to be?
So first we went out to our employee resource groups, and on the culture team we're pretty connected with lots of different people. So we handpicked a few people in the beginning, and we were also thinking about sort of these values-based initiatives that we have around Women's History Month and Lunar New Year and Working Parents Appreciation Day, and also trying to bring in some of those themes along with the values.
Okay.
And so we told people that they had an opportunity to work with a professional storytelling coach, and would they be interested?
Okay.
And so we told them, you're not going this alone. You're not just telling a story with no help. You have a storytelling coach that's going to work with you to prepare a 5-minute story.
So it's developmental, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, most of our employees are used to telling stories in meetings, but a lot of times those stories are sort of, this is the piece of data, this is the insight, and then.
Like more instrumental.
Exactly. And these were really stories where people were digging a bit deeper as a result of Lalith's help to say, what did this story mean to you? Mm-hmm. How did it make you feel? And how have you changed something about your own life as a result of this story? Like, what is the moral? What is the outcome? What impact has this story had? Mm-hmm. As far as the ground rules go, it's really interesting. So in a lot of our rooms, like many other people who are having remote meetings, which is pretty much all of us, you have people doing other things, you have people not very present. We have ground rules actually playing as the people are streaming into the meeting, saying this is a meeting in which we are, as soon as the storytellers speak, we're going off camera, we're going off microphone, and we're also not putting anything in the chat so that all the focus can be on that one storyteller. All the stories are told without any interruption. And then at the end, people can talk, but they cannot ask questions.
Okay, so it's like trying to differentiate it from a work-based presentation.
Yes.
So that would be the wrong vibe, right?
Exactly. It's not slides. It's not let me poke into that. Let me ask a lot of questions. Exactly. It's really like, I am going to listen to your story, and what I might do is respond and say, I felt a real connection to that, or I had a really different experience. All of those things are fine, but because those ground rules are laid out at the top of the meeting, further enforced by Lalith, who is actually facilitating this, and then further brought in as we finish the stories and bring in some more comments.
That's so interesting. So it seems to me that what you're doing there is really deliberately creating a different type of conversation. And I guess, so, I mean, obviously you said one of the drivers was the anniversary and the connection with remote, being fully remote. But how, when you were thinking about going into it, were you thinking we need to create a different type of conversation in this organization to the one that is perhaps more operational, or was that more of a byproduct of this?
I think it was an outcome that we were really happy with. We realized from a lot of feedback, this is a really different kind of meeting.
Sure.
Happening, I would say, sort of at a different plane almost, right? And I think as the word got out about that, people were really interested, because most of our meetings, we might record them, or you might, especially for these types of events that we have. So of this type, that's maybe not a story slam, but some other type. So we bring in someone and they're talking to us about something that they have an expertise in, we would record it. Yeah. But these are not recorded. So the only chance you have to hear these stories is to hear them live.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big draw for people.
Because when people hear about it, they want to come to the next one because they can't see it. Scarcity.
Exactly. And so I think something that has also been really important to us is that people have connection. And we know that remote work doesn't mean you never see each other in person. But frankly, we also know that remote meetings tend to be more transactional. There's not a lot of room, especially in a 25-minute meeting, to have a lot of chat. It's like, we need to get down to business.
Yeah, because I really believe that people say it can happen, but I think that water cooler conversation thing is gone in Teams meetings. It's or if it's there, it's literally like, hello, what's the weather?
Exactly.
What have you been doing? It's you just do not pick up things that just that are in the air, for want of a better word, on Teams. It's very purpose-driven, transactional. It can be more than transactional because it's about getting stuff done.
Yes.
But it's about a thing that you've gone to achieve, and it's not about really deepening relationships or understanding anyone better or finding out what else is going on, is it?
Yeah, there's usually not a lot of time for that. And then if you think about people, maybe if you and I had a relationship beforehand, maybe we knew each other when we worked back in an office and now we're remote, maybe that connection from before would carry us through. But more than half of our workforce now has never worked in one of our offices. And so they don't necessarily have the benefit of a past relationship with people that they're talking to. So that makes it even harder. So we knew that our employees, when we look at the engagement survey that we apply to employees, we have a really great turnout for that survey. We have a lot of people telling us they feel very connected to the mission, that they feel like it's a really inclusive environment. And we also know that that's not something that happens by accident. And so this connection piece really had to be very intentional. And one of the ways we broadened it out is not only sort of bringing this to executives and doing an executive story slam, but we further brought that to an in real life event in which we brought executives together where every single part of it included storytelling, from the icebreakers to
each other, right?
Exactly. And I think something that's really important about that is we had to remind ourselves that even if we knew each other or had spent more time together, that when we get together, we are not there to do things that we already know how to do remotely. We're there to do things that are much harder to do remotely, like facilitating connection.
No, that is really interesting. And did you find? I mean, it's like you actually have done something very deeply cultural there. You're just true to your job title.
Yeah.
But did you find that the kind of appetite for getting involved with it was mirrored with the people doing the storytelling and this is at the employee level, the people doing the storytelling and the people wanting to hear it? Did it kind of go up in parallel?
Absolutely. So I think one thing that I really like about the story slams is that they are not just people who raise their hands. So they're not just the people who love the spotlight or who want to be on stage or who have a story to tell or who are, training as or moonlighting as stand-up comedians or something like that, right? We heard from a lot of people who might be described as introverts or who might be more internal processors, people who weren't necessarily known to the entire organization. And what I liked about that is that it allowed people to be reminded that we want to hear stories from all different sorts of experiences, different tenures, different ages, different geographies, different parts of the company. And I think that piece made it so that other people who might say, if we only took people who are very type A and spotlight seeking, it would totally turn off people who do not consider themselves that way. But because there were lots of different people, when a person who might be a bit more introverted or someone who might have not seen themselves as a storyteller gets tapped on the shoulder by us, they're more inclined to say yes. I've had multiple people that I've asked and to give this opportunity to say to me, I'm quaking in my boots. And yes, I want to do it. And I think that is a really cool reaction. Yeah, and
it's about, I think, so it seems to me that people, these are people you're reaching who have something to say but didn't necessarily have a vehicle for saying or didn't know how to say it. So you're giving them some skills and a medium by which to do it. I mean, actually, it reminds me a bit of when we do these. People often, the last event that I did, I had several really senior people who were saying, "Oh, I've never done one of these before." And we was, and how I feel about it. And we were saying, "Well, don't worry, it's quite relaxed." But afterwards, they were saying, "I really enjoyed that." And it's like they haven't really thought about what it would be like to do this or get message across in this kind of medium. It's a similar sort of thing. Absolutely. So so tell me about the what happened when you unleashed the execs then in terms of execs to employees first and then execs to execs.
Execs to employees, highest turnout of any optional event at the company last year in 2024. So much response from people saying it meant so much to me to hear from my leader or multiple leaders, to see them so vulnerable and authentic, because these stories might be a work story, but they're not a typical work story. So sometimes they're personal stories, sometimes they're sad, sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're scary, sometimes they're all of those things, but they're not the types of stories that you would get in the 2 or 3 minutes before a meeting starts on a video conference call.
Yeah. And then I suppose it's a really interesting way into that sort of authenticity piece. I come from a world where talking about health and well-being in boards, and going to skeptical back in the day, whatever, 10 years probably, it is still a bit like this to an extent, but 10 years ago it was health and well-being by numbers and quite defensive, and boards were skeptical, having to be convinced. It's less so now, because kind of the business case has been won. But there was always this piece of when will a leader talk about their own well-being experience or their own vulnerability. And there were a couple in banking. You may have been living here when it happened. There was a couple of high-profile banking CEOs. I think it was it Santander or Lloyd's. There was one, and he came out and he'd had a breakdown, whatever, and he was very, very untypically open about it. And that was like a bit of a game changer. But in a way, the kind of the attention that was given to that was really a function of the fact it never happens, and that nobody ever does that. So and the reason they don't do it is because saying to board members, will you go and talk about your vulnerabilities and when you had a breakdown or when you've really struggled with your mental health, they're just going to say no in 90% of the time, because it's almost the wrong question. Whereas I kind of feel like you've asked the right question, which is tell us some stories about stuff.
And you get to choose.
And it comes, and the vulnerability is baked inside that. It's not the first question that you're asking. It might not be vulnerability, but it might.
And I think it often tends to be vulnerable, but it's vulnerable based on what that person feels comfortable with. So we're not trying to push people to tell stories that they don't want to tell. We don't need you to spill your secret.
But it's authentic.
And we also know that you need to work with these people tomorrow. So you may not want to tell every story that you have. But when you start to think about how we did this with executives to executives, together in person, which really had a facilitation of much more connection building, we heard things like, I've worked with this person for 10 years and I never knew this about them. And I had that, so I heard that a lot, and I also felt that experience. So I've worked at Yelp for 18 years. I know a lot of people there, and I've known a lot of them for a long time, and we've worked together on so many different projects, and we've moved around the world together and all of these sorts of things. And being in a room with them with the right question asked for 10 minutes, I did learn a lot more about them that really created sort of a fuller picture of who they are as human beings. And it's pretty funny as the facilitator of this, right? Like, I put on this particular event that brings executives together, so I knew what I was trying to do. And I think the best measure of how you might feel about something like this as an organizer is to feel like you're in it and you are also moved by the work, not just that you're seeing other people moved by it. Absolutely, and great feedback, right? And I think so. I'm thinking about that when that happened. Was that facilitated by the storytelling guy, or by you, or was it not facilitated? They'd had the training first and then they knew what to do when they came in. How was that? Because a lot of people will be thinking, how did you do this? You know what I mean? So we knew storytelling was something that was working in 2024, and we get toward the end of the year, so we're in the fourth quarter of 2024. We're looking at, we're bringing everyone together at the end of January in 2025. What do we want them to talk about? And it was very clear to me that we wanted storytelling to be the modality, and we wanted this to be about a leadership contract. So who are you as a leader? What do you want to create in terms of a culture on your team? And what are your expectations? So what will you give, and what do you expect back from your employees? Contract stuff, Exactly. And so what we did was, some things would be unfacilitated. So you would sort of have this speed dating type thing where you would end up at a table and you would pull a question out of a hat and ask it to one another. And we also had a theme around music. So we asked about 50 questions related to music ahead of time. So things like, what's a song that makes you feel happy? What's a song that makes you feel sad? What's a song that makes you think about being 16? What's a song that makes you think about, all of these various
good access points.
And so then people would talk about the music. And so that was sort of the beginning stages. So to get people kind of primed to do this, that we also in the background had 5 executives that were working with Lalith on 10-minute talks. So these storytelling slams, they were 5 for 5 minutes. We had these executives in this executive retreat give 10-minute talks.
Okay.
And we also picked out these sort of themes
to each other.
To one another. Yeah. So just in a room of the sort of 50 most senior leaders in the company. Okay. And what was great about this is that you got these sort of lower stakes, you know, let's talk about songs, let's talk about memories. And then you had these really high stakes, especially for the people who are giving those 10-minute interactions. And then you were also simultaneously working on this leadership contract. So you're asking each other these questions. Like,
so like really open environment created,
And you're moving them around constantly. So you're not just like in this one group, but you're really, if there are 50 people in the room, you're probably getting to spend time with at least 30 of them, which was really great. And then a dinner that was facilitated in the same way. And so just at every point, kind of driving this home to the point where when people were leaving, I thought, are they going to be sick of storytelling? And instead they were like, I'm doing this at my own, you know, IRL gathering. I'm going to bring this into my team calls. Excellent. People felt really inspired.
And I can imagine they all sort of felt really tired at the end of that day because, but they didn't quite know why. Like, because, you know, that you created that open environment, you'd created it. They probably didn't realize that they were in it when they were in it so much because they were just doing it and probably really engaged with it. And then it later on, it'd be like, wow, that was kind of intense, but in a good way.
Empathy requires a lot of energy.
Absolutely, and so I'm really, I mean, it's fantastic. I really like the different modalities within that, and the way that you introduced it without it sort of being, now we're doing this, now we're doing, you know, it sounds like there was a real kind of intentional design to that and flow. And that's Lalith, is it, who's bringing some of that design to it, as well as what you know works in the...
so we're working together and we're sort of talking about like, here's who this group is and here's what the culture looks like and what are some things that could bring people together. So if we want to have an icebreaker, if we want to prepare this leadership contract, how would we continue to bring it forward? And so a lot of iterations on that, which, you know, Yelp tends not to be a company that's bringing lots of outside consultants. And so this was, I think, a bit of a leap of faith on my part, particularly to bring it into this setting for our top leaders. There's certainly a part of me that wondered if they would do it, right? So like, you have to actually you can have the best idea, but if people don't want to go along with this, it's going to fall flat. And I think I found at every turn, just like overhearing people, and also because we had Lalith as an outside facilitator, as an organizer of this event, I felt like I really got to participate, which is not something I usually feel, because I'm doing double duty, right? As the facilitator and also as a peer to the folks in the room. And I think that was possibly one of the best outcomes for me. And I do think there's definitely a place for externals in that thing, isn't there? It just gives you that. It just gives you that guidance, and it releases you. It releases you. I mean, they must trust you, the execs, to let you in to do that in the first place, which is definitely good feedback in itself. I'm thinking about, so where does this leave you? Like, it's you know, culturally. So would you say? I mean, it sounds like you started off not necessarily intending for storytelling to be a deep-seated part of the culture, because it was something you were going to try, right, at the employee level. But has it changed the culture? And when now you look back at it, and well, now you kind of take stock, I guess, of what you've achieved, and also what does it mean? What does it mean for going forward? Because I guess there's challenges about, you've learned something, you've got something that you can use as part of the culture and that people enjoy, and it's helpful and constructive. But then there's also that thing about keeping it fresh. Where are you with it now? What are your reflections on it now you've done it? Yeah, I think when we set out to do this, we really thought about it as a 2024 initiative on behalf of our 20th anniversary. And I think what has happened is that it's become a part of our culture. Storytelling is now embedded in so many areas of the work that we do. And our people are becoming better storytellers, both having listened to it and for some of them to tell their own stories. So this year, obviously, we started out the year with our executives coming together and doing a lot of storytelling. That has led to now in our monthly executive meeting that we have, there's a storyteller for each one of those. And so that's continuing on.
So structuring it in.
Exactly. We've got story slams set for every quarter, and we're starting to see something emerge that is looks a little bit more like learning or training through storytelling. So we have an employee resource group called Yelp Ability, which includes folks who are living with disabilities and a wide range of different, some of those may be physical disabilities, some of those may be visible to people and others may not. And one of the story slams that they are doing is actually a recorded, longer form piece that talks about what it means to live with a disability, what kinds of accommodations are needed from other fellow employees, and what sort of things you can do. And so this is now kind of a next step.
Comms.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my team is in charge of communication, so it makes sense that this is sort of like where it's growing because I think we are always thinking in a really, a tough attention economy, like how do we get people to listen to one another? And frankly, not a lot of people want to listen to robotic, boring trainings. They want to hear from one another. And I think you're also much more likely to be empathetic to someone or to an issue when you know someone who is experiencing it personally. 100%.
Or if it's a great story, right?
Yeah.
And it's and it's such it's so nice to hear this for me, it feels like a real antidote to a world in which kind of marketing and comms has just gone to the dogs because of AI, where everything is just so generic. It's almost like you've taken storytelling inside comms back to basics there.
To tell truthful, authentic stories from people that are not generated by AI. They're coming from humans. And I think actually when my team talks about the promise of AI, what it is to allow computers to do things that machines are really uniquely suited to do, to free up humans to be more human.
I was talking to that really chimes with. So I mentioned before I was talking to Peter Cheese of the CIPD before, and I asked him, because there's a lot of talk on the panels, all the panels around AI. There's a lot of talk about, well, no, AI of course is important, but we have to do it with a human touch. We have to be more human around it. And I said to him, well, is that that's fine, because that is what people are saying, but it's become the trigger response to any professional in this space to say no, but we do need to make it more human. I'm saying, does anybody actually know what that means or how to do that? And I kind of feel like you've come up with one of the ways you might do that, by this through this storytelling route.
That's what we think so.
Which is really, really neat, which is great. So listen, we are coming to an end of our time. I've absolutely loved hearing about this initiative, and I have to say congratulations on delivering it, because it sounds like an amazing thing, and it'd be good to hear where you take it next as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the time and the great questions.
Thank you, Miriam.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Wellhub, the corporate wellness platform transforming how companies care for their teams with a single subscription. Get an exclusive free trial using the link in the description below.